It was great Labour socialists like Nye Bevan that really inspired me to join the party. I believed in equality, in social justice, in human rights and liberty and democracy. And these are Labour values. They were the values that inspired my parents in fighting apartheid in South Africa, where they were jailed and issued with banning orders and forced into exile in Britain when I started to lead the anti-apartheid movement in the late 60s and 70s. And they were the values that continued to propel me, as always a socialist in my adult life, into the party, into the Labour Party. And I joined Putney Labour Party, and I stood for candidate for Putney in the 1983 and 87 elections. This was the high noon of Thatcherism, which was pretty tough. But we had a fantastic party of some of the most advanced campaigning and canvassing techniques, which are now regarded as the norm. And we had more posters than the Tories in Putney. It was the awful David Mellor I was opposing, and yet we got beaten. And that made me really consider where we were going as a party. And I supported Neil Kinnock for party leader in the 80s and got involved in the big reform process, which eventually led to Labour electing Tony Blair and John Prescott and then getting into power. And getting into power and finding myself in government was a fantastic privilege. Being able to take forward the programme of devolution and winning the referendum. As a campaigner, I've always really liked campaigning, getting people persuaded, making an argument, winning an argument, as we did to get Wales its own assembly. Having been selected as a Welsh MP in the early 1980s in the wonderful ex-mining constituency of Neath, and experiencing there what really Labour values are about, the values of caring and strong communities and solidarity, epitomised by the miners. There are very few of them now. But those underlying values are what continue to inspire me in government and inspire all Labour Party members, and we must never forget them. And those are the same kind of values that have enabled me to take forward all sorts of policies, of which I'm very proud. And we ought to be proud as a Labour government and those of us who had the honour to serve in it. And of course culminating in the job I've been able to do in Northern Ireland in the last 2 years, building on what all of my predecessors as Secretary of State did and working with the Prime Minister Tony Blair, predecessors going back to Mo Molan, who started it all off. And that is about creating a society with a shared future in Northern Ireland out of the bitterness and the horror and the darkness of sectarianism and bigotry and violence and terrorism. And again, this is a fantastic Labour project. These are the sorts of politics and the great causes that brought me into the party, which I think continue to inspire party members. And we must never forget, as the media din and attack on us and the relentless assault from the right and the Tories continues, trying to undermine us, we must never forget about the values which inspired all of us to join the party and continue to do so.
Can I ask, what was it like first time you walked into a ministerial office? You know, that must have been after so many years in opposition.
Getting into office the first time, I remember walking into the Welsh office in Whitehall, and they had been used to Tories. These Tories didn't talk to civil servants properly. They made them address them as Sir and Minister, and they were all very formal. It was a kind of old world culture. And I said, call me Peter. It took them about a week to do so. And you know, they operated out of their red boxes. I got people around in a teamwork together. There's a great sense of excitement and change coming in when we won in 1997.
Labour was very much in the doldrums in the late 1970s when you joined. What were the most inspiring things about the party then? Who were the people you most admired?
The people that brought me into the Labour Party were Neil Kinnock and Tony Benn. They later fell out, and I ended up disagreeing with where Tony wanted to take the party, but they were great socialist figures. I remember Tribune rallies in the Brighton conference, in the first one I attended in 1977, at which they invited me to speak. And this is a huge event of more than 1,000 people and inspiring speeches. But that politics was to keep us in opposition for 18 years. But it was nevertheless a tremendously exciting period when the party was going a tremendous democratic change. Instead of the leader and deputy leader being elected by MPs alone, we won the argument that the whole party and individual members should have a say. There was a big battle, the argument that the manifesto should be drawn up jointly with the national executive and not just unilaterally by the Prime Minister or the party leader, that MPs should have to be reselected and not have a job for life once having been chosen by the party. So there were all these big battles to make the party a more democratic institution. But at the same time, I quickly realised the limits of that politics. We were winning arguments in the party, but we were losing arguments in the country.